You're a disgrace to that robe, Judge.
Ma'am, you will control yourself.
If you're the one out of control.
One more word and you're in contempt.
She didn't just break the law. She broke the one rule you never break in Judge Caprio's courtroom: respect. The moment Melissa Carter, a wealthy single mother and real estate mogul, walked through those double doors, something shifted. She wasn't nervous like the others waiting their turn. She was annoyed. Her phone never left her hand. Her designer purse swung like a statement, and her eyes told the world she didn't belong among ordinary people. What no one knew yet was that she had already decided how this day would go. She'd make her point, humiliate the court, and walk away untouchable. But what she didn't plan for was that her arrogance would become the very thing people couldn't stop talking about. I am Frederick, and I explain court cases that reveal something about human nature, the moments when pride collides with accountability, and we get to see what people are really made of. If you've ever watched someone dig themselves into a hole they didn't need to fall into, you'll understand this story. And if you appreciate fairness over privilege, go ahead and hit that like button. It was a Wednesday morning just after 10, Providence Municipal Court. The wooden panels glowed under warm lights as Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and prepared for another case. But this one wasn't going to be ordinary. The bailiff stood straighter than usual, his voice calm but cautious. He called the next case, Melissa Carter. Melissa walked to the front like she owned the building. Her perfume lingered in the air, sweet but sharp, a perfect match for her tone. She didn't glance at the people seated behind her, the nervous faces, the anxious hands gripping papers, the quiet murmurs of those who feared judgment. She looked only at her phone. Her teenage son sat in the back row, slouched, trying to disappear into his hoodie, clearly wishing he wasn't there. Judge Caprio looked at her for a moment, saying nothing. He noticed what others missed, the way she sighed at the wait, the impatience in her stance, the indifference in her eyes. He began by stating the reason she was there: speeding violation in a school zone. She interrupted before he could finish. She said yes, and that she had already told the officer it was ridiculous. The road was empty. It's not like she hit anyone. A murmur moved through the audience. Quiet disbelief. Caprio's expression remained calm. The officer's notes indicated she was travelling 45 in a 25, and that she shouted at him when he tried to explain the risk to children crossing. Melissa crossed her arms. She said the officer was rude to her first. She didn't appreciate being treated like a criminal in front of her son. Caprio replied evenly. Then perhaps today was an opportunity to show him how a parent takes responsibility. Her smirk faltered for half a second. She insisted she was responsible. She was raising 2 kids on her own while running a business. She didn't have time for lectures about driving a few miles over the limit. That was when something changed in the room. The tone, the energy, the collective awareness that this wasn't just another traffic case. You could see the courtroom audience leaning forward, phones lowered, eyes fixed. They knew they were watching a clash, wealth against wisdom, entitlement against patience. Caprio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He told her this wasn't about how busy she was. It was about how careful she wasn't. She exhaled sharply, almost laughing. She said judges love turning everything into a moral speech. He met her gaze, steady and unshaken, and yet he said, she kept walking into courtrooms that had to give them. Her eyes narrowed, the first flash of genuine irritation. She asked if he thought she enjoyed this, if he thought she didn't have more important things to do. Caprio leaned slightly forward. She may, he said, but right now, there was nothing more important than what she was teaching her son about respect. That sentence landed harder than any fine could. Her son's eyes flicked toward her from the back row. The audience could feel the tension, not just legal, but human. The story wasn't just about rules anymore, it was about reflection. Now, I've seen people act out in court before, but this felt different. It wasn't just anger or frustration, it was a belief system. A belief that rules were suggestions and consequences were optional. That's a dangerous place to live. The quiet in the courtroom stretched thin, like air before a storm. Melissa shifted her weight, crossing her arms tightly. She didn't like being challenged, not at work, not at home, and definitely not in front of strangers. She said, with all due respect, this felt like a waste of taxpayer money. She already said she was speeding. What else did he want? A confession on national television? A low ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Judge Caprio stayed calm, his tone even, his words deliberate. What he wanted was a little humility. She broke the law in a school zone where children cross every day. She gave a dry laugh. Children, it was 7:30 in the morning. No one was outside. This whole thing was exaggerated. Caprio adjusted his glasses, unfazed. The law doesn't wait for tragedy before it matters. Her smirk widened, mocking. She said she'd built a successful company, raised 2 kids alone, and paid more in taxes than most people in that room would ever earn. She thought she'd earned the right to be treated with a little respect. Gasps broke out behind her. Tiny, involuntary reactions from the audience who couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Even her son lowered his head, hiding behind his hoodie. Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward, the tone in his voice no longer soft. Respect is not purchased, he said. It's practiced. She blinked, caught off guard for a moment, then recovered. She asked if he was saying she didn't deserve it. He replied calmly. He was saying that the way she treated others was how she'd be remembered. Right now, she was teaching her son that disrespect was a privilege of wealth. Melissa's lips parted, ready to fire back, but the words stalled. You could see the tension in her jaw, the panic flickering behind her confidence. She looked toward the cameras. She knew people were watching. The smirk returned, but this time it trembled slightly. She said, "Judges love making examples out of people like her. It's good TV, right?" The big judge humbling the rich woman. He didn't react. If it were just about TV, he said, he'd let her keep performing. But he was there for something far more important. Truth. The audience was silent now, captivated. Caprio's tone wasn't angry. It was disarming. Every sentence stripped away another layer of her facade. She tried to interrupt again, but he raised his hand gently. "Enough," he said. She'd spoken plenty. "Now listen." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Listen," he repeated, his voice quiet but heavy with finality, because he was about to tell her something her money couldn't erase. A hush swept across the room. Her son looked up for the first time, eyes locked on the judge. Even Melissa seemed momentarily frozen. "What does your son see right now?" Caprio asked. "He sees a mother arguing with authority instead of teaching him integrity. He sees that when you're wrong, you argue louder instead of apologizing sooner. He sees that arrogance wins the moment, but humility wins the lesson." Melissa swallowed hard, the words cutting through her pride like glass. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Caprio folded his hands, his tone softening slightly. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about reminding her, and her son, that responsibility was the only real inheritance worth passing down. The courtroom was silent. Even the air seemed still. For the first time since she walked in, Melissa Carter didn't look powerful. She looked human. What would you have done in the judge's position? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story isn't over yet. The room felt charged, alive with quiet disbelief. Melissa straightened, her pride snapping back like a shield. She said he was twisting this, making her sound like a bad parent because she got a speeding ticket. He didn't know her life. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. She was right, he said. He didn't know her life, but he knew what her choices said about her. Her jaw tightened. She was here because she was late. That's it. He was acting like she was some criminal. Maybe if people in this city worked as hard as she did, they wouldn't have time to sit there judging her. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. Her son's face turned red. He looked down again, ashamed. But Caprio remained still, unshaken, immovable, like the courtroom itself was drawing its calm from him. He said quietly that working hard didn't excuse disrespect. It didn't erase responsibility. She said she had children. That made what she did more important, not less. She folded her arms. Her kids had everything they needed because she pushed herself. They didn't need lectures about respect from strangers. Caprio's tone dropped an octave. No, but they did need examples. And right now, the one she was giving them was one they'd remember for the wrong reasons. Her eyes flicked toward her son. Just for a second, but even that small glance broke her rhythm. She muttered that she wasn't doing this. She had things to do. Caprio told her to sit down. Calm but firm, she said she was done. She turned toward the door. The bailiff shifted. The air went heavy. "Take one more step," Caprio said, his voice still even, and she'd be held in contempt of court. The courtroom froze. Melissa stopped mid-step. Her pride clashed violently with the realization that she wasn't in control anymore. She turned back, her voice trembling. Contempt? For what? Disagreeing with him. For disregarding this court, Caprio replied. For believing the law bends for those who can afford to ignore it. Her cheeks flushed deep red. She said he couldn't talk to her like that. Caprio leaned forward slightly. And yet, He just did. The gallery went silent, utterly still. You could feel the temperature in the room change. He continued, his voice slow and deliberate. This court wasn't a place where status granted immunity. She wasn't there as a CEO, a parent, or a taxpayer. She was there as a citizen, and as a citizen, she answered for her actions, not her achievements. Melissa clenched her fists, shaking her head. This was ridiculous. She came here to pay a fine, not to be humiliated. No one was humiliating her, Caprio said softly, but maybe, for the first time in a long time, someone was holding her accountable. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with frustration she couldn't justify. The same arrogance that once filled the room now seemed small, fragile, almost childish. Caprio rested his hands on the bench. She wanted this to be quick, but life rarely taught its biggest lessons on our schedule. So she'd sit, she'd listen, and when he was done, maybe she'd finally understand why people remembered this case. Melissa hesitated, her confidence faltering for the first time. Slowly, she sat back down. Caprio glanced at the clerk. They'd proceed. The courtroom exhaled. The storm hadn't passed, but it had changed direction. The confrontation was no longer about a fine. It was about something deeper, something that every person who would later hear this story would feel in their bones. The collision of pride and truth. Honestly, watching someone refuse to hear what they need to hear is exhausting, but it's also telling, because the people who fight accountability the hardest are often the ones who need it the most. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to touch. The bailiff stepped back to his post, but every eye stayed locked on Melissa. She sat rigidly in her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the table, trying to look composed, but her silence said everything. Her confidence had cracked. Judge Caprio opened her file again, his tone calm but edged with finality. This was her third violation in less than 2 years. Each time the fine was paid. Each time the lesson was missed. She gave a hollow laugh. So what now? He'd double it? Triple it? Go ahead. She'd pay whatever it took to end this circus. Caprio looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, money had never been the problem in her life, had it? Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? He leaned forward. When she faced problems, she fixed them with money. When she made mistakes, she erased them with money. But this, he tapped the file gently. This wasn't about money. It was about a habit of believing she was untouchable. She stiffened, her breath catching. He couldn't judge her life from a few tickets. He was judging her attitude, he said firmly. She came into this court ready to prove how important she was, but all she'd proven was how little she understood the word respect. The room was silent again. Her son's eyes glistened from the back row, his chin tucked into his sleeve. Caprio continued, his voice softer now but sharper in truth. She was raising children who were learning from everything she did. They learned when she won, when she worked, and when she talked down to people. She could build them a future, but she couldn't buy them character. Melissa's facade cracked. She looked down, her lip trembling. That wasn't fair, she muttered. He didn't know how hard she'd worked. He knew exactly how hard life could be, he said, but he also knew that humility cost nothing, and she kept overpaying for everything else. He closed her file with finality. Her fine for this offence was $300. He was raising it to $750 plus court costs. She looked up, stunned. He couldn't. He could, he said gently, and he just did. Her jaw fell open. He was punishing her because she spoke her mind. No, Caprio said. He was holding her accountable because she forgot that speaking her mind didn't mean disrespecting everyone else's. Her hands trembled. She asked if he thought this made him look powerful. He shook his head slowly. Power didn't come from punishment. It came from patience. She mistook his for weakness. Her breathing grew shallow, but she stayed silent. For the first time, she didn't have an argument, just realization. The judge sat back. He wanted her to attend a driver responsibility course within 30 days. Failure to do so would suspend her license, and he was adding a $200 contempt fine for her behavior today. Total, $950. The number hit her harder than expected. It wasn't about the money, it was the weight behind it. The shame, the lesson, the eyes watching. Her voice was small now. Are we done? He nodded once, almost. He wanted her to understand that this court didn't measure wealth, it measured character. She entered to defend her pride, but she'd leave with something far more valuable. Perspective. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence spoke for them. the kind of silence that follows truth. If you believe justice should be fair for everyone, no matter how rich or poor, consider subscribing to Frederick Explains Court, because what happens next proves why moments like this matter more than we think. For a long moment, Melissa didn't move. Her face was still, but her eyes told a story, the kind that happens when pride finally meets truth. The courtroom waited for her to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The woman who once controlled every room now found herself silent in one ruled by dignity. Judge Caprio didn't rush her. He'd seen this transformation before, the quiet between defiance and realization. When he finally spoke, his tone carried the weight of both authority and compassion. He told her he didn't take joy in embarrassing anyone. His goal wasn't to humiliate her. His goal was to remind her, and maybe anyone listening, that respect was what kept society together. Without it, the law meant nothing. Her voice cracked. She wasn't trying to be disrespectful. She just felt cornered. Caprio nodded slowly. Sometimes we mistake accountability for attack, but there was a difference. He wasn't her enemy. He was her mirror. The audience held its breath. Her son looked at her, really looked at her for the first time that morning. She turned slightly toward him, her lips trembling, the reality of what he'd just witnessed sinking in. Your son, Caprio continued gently, saw how you handled being wrong. What do you think he'll remember? The ticket? Or how his mother spoke to a judge trying to protect others? Her composure broke. Her voice lowered to a whisper. She didn't think about that. He leaned forward, his tone softening even more. That was the problem with arrogance. It made people think only of themselves until someone held up the mirror. Then they saw what they'd been teaching, not with their words, but with their actions. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to hold what little pride she had left. She guessed she hadn't been setting the best example, she admitted quietly. Caprio gave a small, kind nod. Then today was her chance to change that. The fine she paid was temporary, but the lesson, if she chose to learn it, would outlast every dollar. For the first time, her tone lost all defensiveness. He was right. She'd been busy surviving. She forgot what she was showing her kids. That honesty, Caprio said, was the start of something good. It took strength to admit weakness, and that was the kind of strength her children needed to see. A hush fell over the room. You could feel the weight lifting, replaced by something lighter. Not shame, but understanding. Even the bailiff's stern posture softened. Melissa finally exhaled, the tension leaving her body. She'd pay the fine, she said softly, and she'd take the course. Caprio nodded. Good. But before she went, he'd like her to do one more thing. Something far more important than payment. She looked up warily. What's that? Apologize, he said simply. Not to me, to your son. For what he just saw. Melissa froze, tears welling again. Her son's eyes widened from the back row. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her voice broke on the first word. I'm sorry, she said, for talking that way, for thinking rules didn't matter. You deserve better than that. He nodded, eyes red, and whispered, It's okay, Mum. Caprio's voice carried warmth now, the calm after the storm. That's how we heal. That's how justice truly works. As the courtroom sat in silence, it wasn't judgment they felt anymore. It was empathy, because everyone there, rich, poor, or in between, had once needed to learn the same lesson. That humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom, earned the hard way. When Melissa stepped away from the bench, the room seemed to breathe again. The same heels that once clicked with arrogance, now tapped softly, hesitant, almost apologetic. Her son followed a few paces behind, and for the first time since they'd entered, their silence meant something deeper than defiance. It meant understanding. The audience didn't whisper or cheer. They just watched, quietly aware they'd witnessed something real. Judge Caprio leaned back, his hands folded, eyes following her until the doors closed. Justice isn't always about punishment, he said finally, his voice carrying the calm weight of experience. Sometimes it's about reminding people who they really are before pride made them forget. The clerk looked up from her notes, and even the bailiff, usually stoic, seemed moved, because what had just unfolded wasn't a courtroom drama. It was a human one, a story about a mother who came to pay a fine and ended up paying attention instead. Melissa stood by the payment desk, her son beside her, fumbling with his phone. For once, she wasn't scrolling, wasn't posing, wasn't commanding. She was listening to the echo of her own voice from minutes earlier and how hollow it had sounded. She glanced at her reflection in the plexiglass window, and the truth hit her. This was never about a speeding ticket. It was about the speed at which she'd been living, rushing past patience, humility and kindness. Behind her, Judge Caprio's gavel came down one final time. Not as punishment, but as closure. Case concluded, he said quietly, and maybe, lesson learned. In a world that confuses wealth with worth, Judge Caprio reminded people that real power isn't loud, it's fair. Melissa Carter thought she was untouchable until humility touched her first. Her story became a mirror for anyone who's ever let ego outrun empathy. Because in the end, justice doesn't just live in courtrooms. It lives in moments like these, where arrogance is silenced by grace, the son's shy glance, the judge's patience, the quiet dignity that filled the room after the storm. The moral stood tall and timeless. Money can pay the fine, but only character pays the lesson.